Although,
We're starting the utilities meeting today, February 22nd. It's 9:30, and we'll get started right away. So we're starting with,
The first order of business, I think, is going to be to officially determine the chair, or recognize the chair for the 2016.
I, Fred Chang, nominate Cindy Lucarelli to be chair of the Utilities Committee.
Scott Diener seconds.
I'm a non-voting person, so
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
thank you.
okay. So that
Unanimously selected chair of the Utilities Committee.
and I'll reflect that in the minutes. Okay, we know that Mayor Patonsu is on his way, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Do we know if he has a particular interest in any of the first items that he might be missing?
No, I don't believe so.
I guess before we get started, the next, I think, agenda item is this the time?
We're meeting 9:30 to 11 the
Second
second
Monday.
Monday of each month.
Okay.
Is this? Oh yes, this was the third because of
Because
the
of the-
15th.
Right.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
Let me just double check to make sure it's, we have that all.
I thought I said,
set.
I think you did.
Actually, it's the third Monday of each month is when we're meeting. This turns out to be the fourth. So we're meeting the third Monday of each month. That's what we landed on,
Okay.
right smack in between.
That makes sense, because I think the second Monday is economic
It
development.
is.
Yes,
There was
and
a
next one is
there was
on
a
the
conflict, so
21st of March.
Okay.
if that works for everyone's
Yeah,
schedules, we kind
That's
of.
fine. Yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
this is good.
All right. Thank you.
okay, I'll reflect that in the minutes. And didn't I send out meeting notices on the
For this
Outlook
meeting?
calendars of future meetings?
Yeah. Yeah, you did.
Oh, through Mass 360.
Yeah.
I'll have to.
I didn't bring up my.
That's okay, I don't use the calendar on Mass 360. It's
Yeah.
just too much.
It is.
Okay, so if you're ready, we can move to the Bradley drainage issue. So what you have in your packet is Mr. Bradley's written concern. He also, in his packet, so he had his 7 items where he's talking specifically about the area of concern. That there's actually a graphic further back, but I want to go through his packet first. So he has his drainage concerns, then he pulled out a few items from our drainage manual. He has some pictures, and then a sketch of basically a channel that runs north-south between Melcher and Screw.
Hi.
Mayor Potomski's come in. So we just got started. Rob, we've confirmed our 9:30 third Monday meetings, and then Cindy's going to be the chair. So we're on the Bradley drainage issue. And then I have in the packet basically a form letter, as it were, that I've been sending out that our previous attorney had provided for these similar situations. We have a number of these. It's basically the common enemy doctrine. And then there's a
Did you
graphic.
say common enemy doctrine?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
It's basically the common enemy doctrine, in simple terms, speaks to stormwater runoff is the common enemy of both private properties and municipalities. And so the concept of a jurisdiction having to somehow not allow runoff from a road or a road system enter into somebody's private property is covered under the common enemy doctrine. And so I have that standard letter, and then there's 2 graphics that we prepared.
The graphics are specific to his complaint, showing
Specific to
surface
this.
challenge.
Right, and I did some additional research to confirm if there were any easements, and I actually did find an easement, and I confirmed that all of the the alleyways had been vacated, and I have just one as an example. So that's just a very quick overview. Let me get into more.
So we do
detail.
have an easement.
We have an easement. So let's go to the two graphics. So the first graphic, which is just that red line, it's this one here. So that's basically that's the drainage system and the natural drainage course where it had been historically. And so topographically, this was a natural drainage course. We've always called it the Rady Pond, because Rady Street, there's some drainage that comes in from this direction. This continues through Givens Field as a drainage course that we convey through. So this area is a drainage swale. It's an existing drainage course, and in storm drainage design, you discharge to your natural drainage course. Now you mitigate if, depending on the codes at the time. You mitigate for water quantity and water quality, but you discharge to your receiving body of water at your property line. So you find your normal low point, and you attenuate for the quantity and you mitigate for the quality, but you discharge to those natural points. And so this was the drainage course originally, and then it had some city systems tied to it historically, 50, 60 years ago. Then, in association with the easement that I found on the next sheet, which is in blue, this was, what year? Trying to find a date on these. 90. September 27th. I can't really read that date. January 1989. It looks like January 5th, 1989 was when the treasurer stamp was on it. So 89. So in 1989, with the construction of these two homes, because in the one railroad addition to Sydney, you can see that this was all part of Block 3, and you had all those smaller lots, and they routinely combine lots. I think current parcel 01800 is actually original Block 3 lots 18, 19, and 20.
So where's the complaint at?
Well, the complaint is through this whole corridor. We've had
Okay,
a
so
number.
the only piece that we have any control versus, I mean, obviously we can't control the red because it's a 12-inch pipe on somebody's private property. You don't have an easement, but the blue, we do have easements and control over, and have we cleaned that sufficiently? Is this the where's the choke point? Is it?
It's all through. So what's happened is
But it's traveling one direction or the other. Is it exiting here or is it exiting here?
it's coming in through here from it goes
Okay,
south.
so the problem
to
is
north.
it's exiting to these
the
choke points that we don't control.
right in the misconception. So here's the misconception. So this pipe was put when these two houses were built on 021 and 018. When the person went to build those, that drainage course was going right through their property. So they put it in a pipe. Now, just like the car wash on Bethel, where they didn't have an easement, and the owner of that property came to the city and said, "Hey, you need to fix this pipe because it's collapsing." They didn't have an easement. It was a private culvert. In this particular case, this part in blue, the city accepted an easement in 1989.
But that's not the problem.
That's not, well, no, I know, I'm getting to the problem. So that piece we have a responsibility to maintain. But the problem is that in this, all the alleys have been, this used to be an alley that went from Spruce to Melcher. But those alleys were all vacated. The drainage course over time has been filled in with a number of
Trees?
No,
lawn clippings and,
lawn clippings,
Brush.
barbecue pits. People, basically, they've just been saying, hey, this is my yard. And so this drainage course has been impeded over the years, and we've had a number, since I've been here, we've had a number of complaints about the city needing to go in here and take care of it.
so long and the short of it is we don't have any control over
We have
this.
no control over this. And even though, Mr. Bradley, printed out copies of drainage course design, the only way that this system is gonna get resolved is that if all the neighbors get together.
And you told him that in their letter?
Zach had already told him that previously.
Was this the letter that was actually sent?
No, he's not received the letter.
Okay.
Zach talked to him,
So it sounds like you need to formalize what the conversation was
Yeah.
into a letter saying that this is your
yeah, I'm getting,
neighbor's issue.
Did Zach draft something? I thought he already drafted.
I don't think he's sent anything because he met with him in person and basically told him this, but basically said that if you're not, so this is
I
a,
think maybe he did start drafting something.
he started
maybe-
to. My understanding is he started to send something and then, but Mr. Bradley then showed up to the council meeting and so this got put on the, I was gonna deal with this just like I normally deal with public works complaints. I'll basically be sending him these maps, this letter modified specifically for his property, and basically say, look, if you as a group of homeowners want to, probably have an easement amongst themselves or work cooperatively and just agree to move stuff out of this swale, then that's a simple solution. But the problem is you have people that have some hard features now constructed within it.
Right.
So it's really it's a civil
Yeah.
matter.
Is there a role for the city to write the property owners a letter to tell them that they need to do that? Like, we could be the.
Well, I have-
That's a good point. Is that letter that you're gonna send to him, you should probably send to all the property owners.
I mean, is there a
along
role
that
for
swale.
us, whether or not we want it, that we could at least tell them what they need to do?
We can. There isn't an
absolutely.
official role. I mean,
I mean, we obviously aren't gonna pay for it, but I think if we could tell them what they need to do, at least they would all understand that they're responsible. It's almost like they have to form an LID type thing, or.
yeah,
Like, just-
they need to form a ULID if they want to address it. But it's going to take, again, it isn't going to be like in the ULID where you have a 60%. This is a case where
Everybody.
100% are all going to have to agree to deal with it. But I will send a letter to Bradley.
This letter, by the way, I think was very well done. I don't know who did it or who,
As Carol and I worked on that, and so that's a generic.
but yeah.
We have the case up at Sage Court where there was a lot more to that letter, but that's kind of the heart of the statutory piece. So I'll send a letter to Bradley plus other residents.
We should have provided color pictures.
Well, I have color pictures in the original packet. I just try not to use
Okay.
print color. It's very expensive.
Nicholas,
I'm trying to be fiscally
We should have brought an
responsible.
iPad with color photos.
next time.
So that's the Bradley issue.
All right.
Next is the water system overview. So Thomas Hunter is our water system manager as of when officially a little over a year ago, year and 3 months. And so I'll have Thomas go through this water system. And then when he gets to the end of his water system overview, I'll jump in with the issue that the Whittletons wanted more explanation on. So with that,
Okay. Yeah, my name's Thomas Hunter. I don't think I said hi to you guys. Sorry. Nice to officially meet you. So I put together a water system update, and I'm certainly not going to go through it line for line. It's more for reading. I also brought with me only one copy, but it's our water quality report for 2015. If anybody wants to look at that, it's important to note that the water quality report for 2015 is mandated that it's actually a year behind, so that's 2014 data. That's how that works. In light of the Flint, Michigan issues, I think that it's important that we highlight certain information for people.
And I'd like to pre-frame his presentation with, prior to Thomas coming on board, our consumer confidence reports, our water system overview, as far as, having taken readings forever, that those would just kind of go into a black hole, where Thomas has actually developed spreadsheets, uses that data. The difference between how this water system is being operated today versus a year ago is night and day. And so I'm going to take complete credit for that, for recognizing Thomas's ability. We're moving in the right direction from a water system standpoint. It's night and day. So with that.
Thank you. So a couple of key highlights for our water system. We're not unlike any other, the United States does an annual update on its infrastructure, and water systems in the United States received a D- score in 2015. It's been that way for 30 years. It's an aging infrastructure and it's underground, so nobody sees it. That's kind of a general sense. So we're trying to take some steps to be very prudent in not just how we're managing our water system today, but how we're managing it 30 years from now, 50 years from now. One of the important pieces, and I almost say this because it's a compliment to the people in this room and definitely not myself, is 5 years ago the PUD reached out and formed an ILA with all of the water purveyors in Kitsap County, and you guys were part of that decision to commit, I think it's $5,000.
We did $5,000 a year for 5 years.
Right, and the fruit of that labor is going to be produced here in March. We're going to receive a USGS model that is really the poster child for how we need to manage our water resources in the future.
Because we have aquifer, other than
Right.
Bremerton, we're primarily aquifer, not surface water.
Right, Bremerton is the only surface water purveyor in Kitsap County. Everybody else is in groundwater aquifer. There's predominantly 3 different aquifers, and this model is really our way of going to ecology and being able to procure water rights when we need them and co-manage a system that we all pull out of. We're all pulling out of the groundwater layer, and so it's important that we collaborate and understand the impacts that we're having. We share an aquifer with Bremerton, that is the same aquifer that we share with the shipyard, it's the same aquifer that we share with West Sound. I mean, we're all pulling out of a common resource, and so it's really vital, and this sort of work has not been done before. So I couldn't be more excited to see that model in March.
It also helps us with our water rights agenda, which last year we had Robinson Noble, our hydrogeologist, prepare a roadmap, as it were, for the next 2 years, which is associated with the Well 10 project, to comprehensively, at the end of that, do any water rights transfers, adjustments that are needed to basically maximize production at certain wells and decommission other wells. And so that process will involve both a water rights attorney, and it'll also involve consultation with the tribes, primarily in ecology. And so having this groundwater model now is a great tool to have successful conversations.
Yeah, water rights law is very complicated and antiquated, and it's going to change. But just like anything else, that's a long process. So it's good that we have that. So one of the issues that came up in 2015 was obviously the drought. Washington State was in a drought stage. However, groundwater purveyors did not see that. We didn't see any decline in aquifer level over that. Preliminary data from the USGS model tells us that we pull out 5% of our annual recharge, and the rest of it is released to saltwater, which means we have a lot of water. It's a good thing. One of the keys for us in the future is maximizing how we draw our water, however. Aquifers that are shallow see quick recharge, but they also see quick depletion, whereas aquifers that are deep can sustainably be pumped over a period of time, but they take longer to recharge. Our goal is to have an aquifer situation in the future where we can pump shallow aquifers at times where they will recharge quickly and utilize the deep aquifers in the summer when we can pump them longer, but they're going to need the full winter to recover. So that's one of the things that we're really looking at. Overall, we have some pretty good wells. The wells themselves, the physical holes in the ground, are good. We had a couple of our wells cameraed this year to inspect the screens and take a look at what's going on the interior, and they all looked pretty good. Some of them are undersized, and we're going to deal with those issues as we kind of analyze our water system, not just for today's customers, but for tomorrow's, and I think that's really key.
Will this report have a map of where the wells are located?
It does not. No, that's something that we can provide.
I mean, and do we want to, or is that, okay,
We need to be pretty careful about
Okay.
what information we put out
right.
there.
I've gotten conflicting information. At one time I was told that we're not allowed to even show our water resources on a map. But then I think the Department of Homeland Security has reined back a little bit, but typically we don't.
Okay.
You know, there's a certain amount of concern that that's a
I can
terrorist
see you wouldn't want to
opportunity.
give the specific locations for,
You got public records.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so
if you
there's,
could give like a general idea, like are they dispersed evenly throughout our area, that sort of thing?
They're throughout the city.
Into the boulevard, up
Okay.
by KFC,
Okay.
Van Zee,
McCormick.
McCormick.
Okay.
You know, they
Is
are
your
dispersed.
general sense, and I don't want to hijack the meeting, but that our rights are superior to other areas? For example, do we have more water potentially than Central Kitsap? Or do we even know? I mean, and you may know.
I think the answer is we have more than adequate water rights for our service area. Every service area has a certain amount of water withdrawal that they need for their future, and it's GMA based, it's Water Coordinating Council based. So we don't compare to like Silverdale. It isn't like an apples to apples there. It's more of a, do we have adequate water rights given what GMA has said we need to provide in the future?
yeah, and
We're in better shape than others. Bainbridge Island is in a bad way with their
I mean,
aquifer
development
recharge.
is eventually going to be constrained by water, maybe not in our lifetime.
We have water rights, but our challenge is we have
Get
artesian wells that we need to get off of and get into the deep aquifer
And
wells.
aging infrastructure.
And aging infrastructure.
Yeah,
also.
so the paper, we've got plenty of water on paper. It's the production
Getting
side,
to it.
the source
Yeah.
side.
yeah, there are other purveyors in this area that have the exact opposite problem. They have the infrastructure, they don't have the water rights. And not to get too deep into it, the reason that this problem exists with water rights is because a long time ago, before the tribes got heavily involved with ecology, people were just throwing in applications for water that they didn't need because they saw the future, and they knew that they didn't want to end up like the city of Paulsbo, who does not have the water rights or the infrastructure, which is why they rely on the PUD. So on paper, we've used all our water, but in the real world, we're not using more than 5% in Kitsap County. So that's the issue. There's a breakdown in law, and we'll get there. It's just going to take time.
Right. There are conversations currently regarding not a redo of water rights law, but
Right. There's
What
been some
needs-
court cases that have really prompted.
right. So it's it's in process. Water rights law after I'm dead and gone will look a lot different than what it looks like now.
So, moving forward, and jump in if you have questions. We've got a couple of different, well number 11 out of McCormick is a shovel-ready project. We updated that, those numbers to 2015 dollars. We're really just looking at how we can fund that project.
And remember that well 11 was the deep water well replacement of the McCormick well field, which is in a shallower aquifer. So we drilled that well. It's just not online. So all we have to do to comply with ecology to get out of the shallower aquifer that has more of an impact on groundwater recharge, stream bank recharge, is to get into the deeper aquifer. Like I said, we drilled the well and we basically did the design for well 11. We just haven't gotten to the point of actually connecting it because it's kind of a rebuild of the McCormick surface system.
It's important to note that it's a Department of Health approved design, so we're
Yes.
already through that process.
Yeah, it's ready to go. And so from a funding standpoint, if there's some grant opportunities, we would have a set of plans on the shelf and we would go move ahead with that, right?
Is there a lifespan associated with their approval?
No, not really. This doesn't really twilight.
Okay.
Is that a couple $1 million project?
About $1 million, I'd say 800 to $1 million.
The original design was, it comes in 2015 is about 850,000 with some minor adjustments, probably $1 million. There's some tank stuff that needs to be taken care of, some reservoir stuff.
Right, it's an older design, a 2010 design maybe.
2009.
That obviously we want to look at ourselves. Ecology will, just like with the State on Transportation project, when we get into the final construction drawing phase, we'll do that approval with the building department. They pretty much just blessed more the system component side of it.
Right. So there's well 11. We received from Ecology this year the legal rights to appropriate the waters of well 4B. We don't own the hole in the ground or the pump station or anything else. We just track the usage.
And well 4B is the standalone well that's out at McCormick. So the McCormick system had both irrigation water and domestic water. They had their own water system, and the McCormick water system in the early 90s was turned over to the city. There was an agreement that transferred the wells, and the system is a city-operated system. And well 4B, the city and McCormick Land Company entered into an agreement to basically it was a pay-to-play to procure, to basically develop your water rights in the water system as a municipal water right. There was some confusion, as you may know, on the well 4B that the whole system, which included the wells 1, 2, and 3 plus 4B, came to the city. The city didn't advise the Department of Ecology that 4B, through an agreement, was going to go back to McCormick, and so there was a irrigation only well that suddenly became a municipal water right. It took 10 years to resolve. We've now resolved that. Those water rights are now back with us, and then there's agreement for a certain amount of acre feet per year that go back to the golf course. But that physical well is still completely disconnected from our system. We don't withdraw water
In the
from
middle
the
of the golf
system.
course.
Yeah.
It couldn't be ours.
That water, basically, the well pumps into, in essence, a series of channels and lakes that are water hazards to the course, and then they draw for their irrigation out of those systems. We do meter that because that agreement that we had with the golf course, the current agreement when we receive those water rights back, calls for the purchasing of water up to a certain amount for free, in essence, through the agreement, because it's their water. They just transferred the water rights back except for their use of a certain amount, 245 acre feet, I think it was.
Yeah, 225.
225.
And part of the reason that Ecology takes this stance is Ecology and Department of Health cannot stand having a bunch of small water systems. They want purveyors to manage the water rights and get away from these small little mom and pop. Because, quite frankly, it's just hard for them to enforce regulation on them. So, We had all of our reservoirs cleaned in 2015. And one of our reservoirs, our South Sydney Reservoir, we have removed from service in 2015. It met its lifespan.
That's at Paul Powers Park.
Right. It's
Is it empty now?
it is empty. Yeah, we're gonna be looking at trying to get someone in here to remove that at some point. Potentially, there might be there's a lot of steel there, so if we could work something out to where those two ships passed in the night, that'd be awesome.
Somebody wants to steal, take it down.
Yeah.
It was serving no function. And again, we didn't know that until Thomas started actually looking at the pumping numbers, and we realized that the water that was coming out of well 8 for the most part was just kind of going through and
Watering the ground.
Jack Creek.
It's essentially a 100,000 gallon reservoir with the overflow where it was at. It was reduced down to 80,000. When you take 80,000 gallons and plug it into our overall water budget as far as storage, less than 1%. It was serving no purpose. So it was really just a maintenance. Why would we continue to invest, any time or effort into it?
Wasn't providing pressure,
Right.
wasn't providing fire storage. It was just a Swiss cheese metal tank that was really providing water.
What well number was that?
That was South Sydney Reservoir, well 8.
Well,
It's just down the
Yeah.
street and feeds into it rather quickly.
It's the one at Paul Powers Park.
It's almost like a sightseeing point,
With liability.
though. A viewing station,
Yeah.
yeah. If someone just took a drone picture of it, of going all around it, I don't know why, but they did, Paul Powers Park, so.
It's a great view from up there.
Mm.
So there's just some things that we're going to be working on here in 2016, some maintenance and upkeep stuff that we saw from our divers going in there. Water quality and monitoring. We have put together a schedule. Department of Health has this is how many samples you need to take, sort of thing that we follow, procedure. We put together a more robust system to ensure that things like Flint, Michigan don't happen. Hats off to our water quality specialist, I call him Alan Rickett. He does a phenomenal job. We don't fail samples, and that is a lot of systems have bloopers. They'll fail a sample because the sample wasn't taken correctly. It's not because there's an issue with the water. And I think that overall our staff does a phenomenal job of taking samples. Failing a sample is a big deal, and so the fact that we don't see that ever is really awesome. So
And we've got some additional complication because we're connected to the Bremerton water system. That's a surface water, so there's an additional coordination of those samples and criteria in place, procedure in place if either we or Bremerton fail sample. There's that brings up a whole different level of additional sampling.
Right. One of the things that we did is we reached out to Sandy Bretlinger, Department of Health, and we coordinate our samples with Bremerton so that if Bremerton were to fail a sample, we've taken our samples on the same day so we wouldn't have to take repeats, which would increase our chances of accidentally failing a sample. And so there's just been a lot of effort there that I think is really important when it comes to the water quality monitoring piece.
Right, we don't want to have to do a boiling notice if we don't have to.
Right.
Because suddenly people just get freaked out.
Right.
So, yeah.
The important thing to remember too about Bremerton, because we have that relationship with them and we do share some water, they are a surface water system that has groundwater wells. The location of the Anderson well field, which is the one that's right next to our intertie, is much closer than Bremerton's surface water. So we could get surface water, but they would have to take that Anderson well field out of service for that to happen.
Right.
So when we talk about that Flint, Michigan scenario, it couldn't happen because of our relationship, the way that we report. When we send a sample in to the lab sends out 2 responses, one to us and one to Department of Health. So we're kind of double blind protected. We couldn't decide not to tell Department of Health or accidentally forget to tell Department of Health if we had high lead levels. But 2, we're really not using surface water. And Flint, Michigan was a surface water issue or a groundwater issue. So I just feel like that's really important for people to understand. I know we've received a lot of phone calls and emails about that. So
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
One is where it could happen potentially is the surface water coming from Bremerton, but we're not typically getting surface water. We're getting their well water.
Right.
And as we develop our own wells and remove our
Get away from
dependence
it.
from Bremerton, we won't have that issue at all because we won't
There'll
have
be
the
a time.
potential to get surface water.
And also, the surface water that we're receiving from them is in a protected watershed. The water that Flint, Michigan, it was like, throw a sump pump in the Duwamish River and start
Right.
pulling water out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, big differences. And for your average homeowner who, their knowledge of water is when they turn the faucet on, water comes out. There's a lot of details there that they don't see. And just trying to get that message out, I think, is really important. Helping people understand why our water is so safe and why we should really feel fortunate that we have the sources that we do. Water rights, we kind of covered that. The city has sufficient water rights. We just started dealing with an issue of putting the facilities in place to secure a bright water future, not just for the customers, but also for development. Like I said before, there are cities in this county that are fighting development issues because they don't have the water or the ability to get water from point A to point B. And we certainly don't want to be the roadblock for somebody not being able to develop. So, infield service. In 2015, we implemented a couple of different procedures. We started our GIS iPad program, which is absolutely phenomenal. This gives our public works employees the ability to go out into the field and to map infrastructure. For years and years and years, everybody had a GIS person and everything funneled through that person, and that person was always overworked and burned out because there's a lot of data to process. So now we have people in the field making adjustments. The really important feature is we are starting to connect our as-builts to the infrastructure on the iPad. So when you're out at a lift station and you want to see the as-builts, you hit a button and it pulls it up. You don't have to drive back to the shop and find a number, go upstairs, pull the map. I mean, there's really some efficiencies that we're starting to see, and every day we find a new use and a better way to utilize these. And so when I first went to Mark and I said, "Hey Mark, we need to go buy some iPads," he was like, "What is it, fantasy football time? What's going on?" But we really, I think, have started to see a change in how we do things, and I think it's really awesome.
I think that is too, and I commend you for being ahead of the curve on that. I think a lot of places would like to be where you were talking about being.
Well, we used to have a Trimble unit that was
Yeah,
expensive,
yeah.
difficult to use, difficult to download. And when we found out that these iPads, that you could stand on it and you could get well within the precision and accuracy that we would need, and you could just, we had an intern here over the summer that just, he was reading meters and he was just, or he's following the meter readers, and he was just like, okay.
Yeah, I think we mapped 95% of the city's water meters in
For the summer?
7 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
With iPads.
That's pretty cool.
I thought it was going to take a little longer.
And then now,
The asset management piece, the component that these play in asset management is huge. We've got the bridge that goes over Blackjack Creek. So when Dave Bolts, our stormwater guru, he hates that term, goes out and when they clean those grates, he can check on there in the asset field that those were cleaned on March such and such. I need to create a new designator for that. It keeps bugging me about it. But those things are there, so it's no longer this institutionalized knowledge in people's heads and then they retire and we don't know what's going on. It's
Or paper reports.
paper, yeah. And this is instant. So when the intern was out there mapping, I can pull up the map online, or it's not online technically, but through the Esri server, and the updates are about a second. So when he maps a meter, I see it. So eventually, once we get everything in place, Mark will be able to be at a computer and be like, "Oh, where are they at on hydrant maintenance today?" And he'll be able to see all the hydrants they've done today, and so on and so forth.
right, we're creating layers for signage cleaning, signage reflectivity inspections. Eventually, our ADA transition plan will have all the sidewalks and the curbs, red, yellow, green, And so we've really built this platform to have different layers and have all these attribute files, which is labor intensive to obviously once you get
It is.
the nodes in place and to be able to link data to it. But we've got staff and we're looking at bringing on another person that through our stormwater system that the FTE was approved that has extensive GIS knowledge in building this sort of attribute file, scanning documents and being able to pull up as-built or service histories. So yeah, we're moving in the right direction.
Do those, go ahead.
From an emergency management standpoint, this is huge because we're able to map zones, and when something happens, you know, when Cascadia hits or whatever it is, you know, Mark's going to be able to say, okay, you know, you go to zone 1, you go to zone 2, you go to zone 3, and everyone's working off the same template. So I think that's also a very important note.
Right, we took in a numbering scheme, we took our emergency management zones and we created a numbering system, because our other numbering system was kind of helter-skelter. So now we're based on the emergency management zones that our police and fire are responding to, and then now we have systems that are linked to that.
And we're about 10% into it. This is not a program that you start and then you stop. This is a never-ending, continually evolving thing. It's kind of Pandora's box. Once you get into it, it's like, oh, we can use this for that. It's cool.
Well, it is though a front-loaded effort with getting everything on. Then
Right.
it's just a matter of maintenance.
Right.
Maintaining your layers.
Right.
That's cool.
So then finally, I included some recommendations. I put that last paragraph down there at the bottom as far as the water system hydraulic analysis. We are looking at the future hard and what the future looks like from a water standpoint, how we can replace things. You know, the issues that we have today, we can't view them microscopically. Sometimes fixing an issue means zooming out to 50,000 feet and fixing a global issue. We are starting to look at how we can change the hydraulic landscape of our system to utilize things like gravity to better, so we're not pumping the same water 3 times. And I think that those conversations today are going to turn our water system in 15 years to look very different than it does today. And it is going to take, like the GIS program, some front-loaded effort. We're going to have to be aggressive about trying to get out in front of some grant opportunities and programming money, because these are not small items. They are big items, but they're very, very necessary items.
Right, so that's a good segue then into responding to the Whittleton's email. So the city, as you know, remember that we had hired Robinson Noble as our hydrogeologist a number of times through the years. Last year we asked them to prepare this roadmap for the next 2 years of water rights that was associated with the well 10, assuming that well 10 was going to come online at 2,000 gallons a minute. So that was all moving ahead. We received the well 10 loan, and we were moving ahead with the well 10 project. When I came here in 2008, within a year of understanding the system, long before I applied for loans or grants for well 10, I had concerns that well 10 was in the wrong location. And you can go back to some of the utility committee meetings back in 2009, 2010, where I brought to the utility committee my attempt to change the course of that ship, even though the well had already been drilled. And basically ecology at that time had said, no, you're not moving it. And we didn't have this groundwater study in place yet.
Data we had at the time for ecology said
Right.
it was going to be right there.
Yeah, and there's no blame to anybody that well 10 has got drilled where it was. That's basically where the agencies said it has to be because of the influence of groundwater on Blackjack Creek. I just looked at it and said, we're going to do well 9. Can we just go well 9 into a deep aquifer and save money and have gravity down rather than pumping water up? That I wasn't successful. We, come to present day, we were moving ahead on the well 10 project. So 2 things happened, I guess. One was Thomas came on board And when he got to know the system, he came to me and he said, why are we doing this? The other thing is that groundwater study now had been complete. Well, I guess three things happened. And then we had a meeting with the West End Utility District where we were having some GMA retail water service area conversations that had to do with the Bethel tank. And so at this point, this was conversationally, knowing that we were, I guess there was a fourth piece. Well, 10 was originally determined to have being delivered 2,000 gallons a minute. During the drilling process, they had a collapse of the casing. They went from a 16 to a 12 or something. Immediately when they went to that smaller casing size, our 2,000 went down to 1,600.
1,400.
Or 1,400, just because you couldn't get that big enough, that large a pump through that smaller casing.
Right.
So then when we started on the well 10 design, at well 10, getting ready to pump test the well, some initial results showed that it was yielding much less than even that amount. And we still haven't received that pump data. So internally, knowing that we have this water rights budget in place, that we were in the process of the well 10 design, really to do the water, it was really to get it pump tested enough just to get a water quality sample so that we could do the final design on the manganese filtration system, and struggling to get that pump test. Then knowing that the groundwater model was done, and then knowing that we had these conversations with West Sound that had to do with service area overlap, we had met and determined that we're going to continue with well 10, but let's not just pound a square peg in a round hole. We need to take one last look at, are we doing the right thing? Is taking a $6 million loan at well 10 the right thing to do? If we can't right that ship, if it doesn't make sense from a standpoint, and this was my direction to Thomas and BHC, our consultant, if ecology won't buy off on it from a water rights standpoint in the tribes, potentially moving, stopping the well 10 project and doing a different well at a better location that provides future water for 50, 100 years in the future, that isn't pumped water, it's gravity water. If ecology doesn't buy off on it, if health doesn't buy off on it, if we can't transfer the current well 10 loan and get more time, and if it doesn't save the money to the city overall, or at least break even, then we're just going to continue what we're doing. And we're still continuing certain parts of the well 10 design. This was a side activity that was, okay, we already got water rights money budgeted. We're going to take a very small portion of that and simply have Thomas and Robinson Noble meet with Department of Ecology to check one of those boxes. Because basically I told Thomas, we're not going to, I know it makes sense, but unless I can check yes on all those boxes, it's the quintessential Fortran program, if then do loop. If I can't get enough yeses in that program to come back then to the utility committee, to the council, and say, we're going to change direction, we weren't going to change direction. So what was approved the other night was basically just Robinson Noble facilitating a meeting with the tribe and ecology to check one of those boxes. Because the issue is, if we were to drill a deep aquifer well by the Bethel tank, that's closer to Blackjack Creek, and we'd have to get that approval. And if they said, yeah, tribes changed their direction, we don't want to dump water into the creek anymore, it's just a waste of water, and they said yes, and the health department said, yeah, it makes sense to move the DWSRF loan up to there, we're going to give you 2 more years and give you the same amount of money. And if we know that we can only get 800 gallons a minute out of that well 10, doesn't mean we're going to leave well 10, it just means that
It's a future source, not
future
current
source. And if we could, under the same timeline, get a source up here that takes care of literally all the water needs, and the water's where we need it, rather than really what we're doing now, which is wheeling water all the way to Sedgwick, Sydney. it was worth having a second look. And so that's really all we were doing at this point, was I didn't really want to go and have a public meeting on that topic until Thomas came back and said, yes, 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 and yes.
It's ambitious.
Yeah.
No, so to piggyback on that, if there were 5 yeses, we're not walking away from well 10. If you look at our UGA and our service boundary, what that will look like once we fully expand from a service perspective, that reservoir means a lot to the customers east of that well. There's an extremely long 8-inch water main that runs down that West Sound currently feeds, and that well will provide service to those customers in the future. It has to. It's in the prime location for that. Our issue is nobody's building downtown like they're building up in the Sedgwick area as far as footprint. We're not increasing footprint downtown. We are increasing footprint up in the Sedgwick area, and we need the water up there. We have to be able to provide service to them. So if you look at our water system, can we provide downtown with water right now? Yes. Can we provide the Sedgwick area with water right now?
Not
It's
without
close. And
not
so-
without getting water from West Sound or Bremerton.
not without buying the water. And so we don't have unlimited funds. We need to evaluate the most efficient way to use our resources. And, going back to the well 10 piece, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, we didn't understand groundwater the way that we understand it now. People punch wells in all the time in areas that are known to have water, and they don't get water out of them. This happens. It's groundwater. It's 1,000 feet deep. We can't see down there. We don't really know what's going on around that casing. There's no way to physically see it. We make assumptions based off of well logs, but that's what they are. Things change down there. I mean, gravel packs shift. You can get silt that comes in, or there's types of natural growth that occur that can restrict flow.
Right, that's an artesian well that has a certain flow, and there was an assumption on what it would yield while being pumped.
Right. And the shipyard is in the same aquifer. They pull 2,000 gallons a minute out of it. I mean, they pump a lot of water. Like I said, we're in that same aquifer. We're in a different location, and it's hard to tell. The biggest thing for us was, okay, are we going to spend $50,000 and try and rehab this well? Or are we going to really look at the needs of today and the needs of tomorrow before we just jump down something? And that's where I'm really thankful for the citizens of Port Orchard that people like Mark are like, yeah, we need to. It's a tough conversation to have, but we have to have it. And I think that's the important piece.
Yeah, and it wasn't I wasn't trying to be non-transparent. It was about timing, and I wanted to at least have answered some key components. And the first one was ecology and the tribe even considering from a water rights perspective and drilling a well in the Blackjack Creek influenced watershed. That was the number one question, because that was the decision before I came here that put well 10 where it was at.
Yeah, 12, 15 years ago, they said no.
They said no. Right. And so that was really the first piece, and the logical option, instead of having a budget amendment and trying to add a component, was, well, it's a water rights issue. We already budgeted $125,000 for water rights. Let's just have Robinson Noble spend $9,000 of it, $8,000, a very small portion of that, to get us through that first question period. Then the conversation with health, depending on that answer. Again, it's a Fortran program. If ecology and the tribe says no, then we're not. It's like, okay, then we're going to get the most we can get out of well 10. If it turns out to be 600 gallons a minute, then that's all we're going to get. So that's kind of how that came
I'm
about.
slightly optimistic about the ecology take, because Wyra 15, our basin that we pull out of, is a closed basin. You cannot get new water rights. It just doesn't happen in today's climate. But we have plenty of water rights, and you can transfer water rights.
Right.
So we have options. The key is, are we gonna have to mitigate? What does that mitigation look like? What's that process gonna look like? So I think that we're asking the right questions. We just need to get more information before, we don't want to make a decision without having the correct information.
And I think you guys, you're an hour into your meeting and you've only gotten through
Yeah.
2 items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is pretty important.
Well, the other ones are very quick.
Yes.
These were.
This
these
was
were-
really
Each get a
important.
And just one final piece though is if we were to change the well temp project, as we mentioned the other night, we would still do Perry as a road and drainage project because we've already got a certain level of design on that, so we're not gonna walk away from that.
What's ATEC treatment?
ATEC treatment is a filtration system. They're local. They're out of Bainbridge Island. They have a very tenured history of effectively removing manganese as well as other
Green sand.
sediments. It's actually pyrolusite, but it's the same concept. You filter the water, you backwash it once a day, and you get rid of that backwash. It attaches to manganese, and then the manganese is removed from the water. They're simple, and they're on the West Coast. You're talking to someone that knows that can get out there tomorrow. You're not ordering parts from, Illinois that were shipped through Miami and then up here to talk to Clark PUD, talk to any of the major water providers in the area that have been using them for about 20 years, and they haven't had to replace their pyrolusite, which is huge. It's like a membrane filtration. When the cells die, it's a lot of money to replace them. So they're a really, really reputable company.
And we went through a process to, in essence, get approval for sole sourcing that system, and so that's what's gonna be on the Well 9 retrofit. Okay, water sewer concurrency, this should be very brief.
Yeah, so we have a new concurrency procedure. Took a little bit of time to get everything in place, but I think that the city has taken a really big step in the right direction for development. This procedure allows us to really track development, and essentially a developer will fill this out, they will check a couple of boxes, and we will give back to them a certificate of reservation once we've gone through receiving a hydraulic model from the consultant and all that stuff. But it really starts to formalize when you come in and you say, hey, I want to put in a 300 unit apartment complex. From now till I get building permit, what does that process look like? Well, it looks like this. And it's just a little bit more simple. It's easier for us to track, and instead of handing them, well, here's our municipal code, and
And it's the predictability piece.
Right.
And this is for water, sewer, and transportation. And so this will, hopefully, it gives us the tool to avoid any kind of a moratorium where, like you said, as development comes in, we're able to see and allocate transportation capacity or water and sewer capacity and not suddenly wake up one day and go, oh, we have no capacity.
We're out of water.
Yeah, so it's really, this is a GMA piece. The city's needed to have done this for years, and again, the council approved the concurrency piece, I think, at the end of last year.
Right.
To move into concurrency.
And this is also another thing that it will change a number of times before we get it perfect. Just like anything else, once you roll it out, you really start to see the flaws once you get this out there. So we're already looking at a fee change in the fee schedule. Nick and I have been talking about that as a piece that'll make it easier and a little cheaper. So you'll be seeing that here in the next couple of months.
So I see in here that we will help prepare a report at the applicant's expense.
Well, they have two options. They can hire their consultant
Right.
and pay for that, and then pay our consultant to review theirs. Or we give them the option to just hire TSI, PACE, or VHC to just do it.
Okay.
So they have two options on that.
Okay,
Right.
so it's not actually staff per se that's helping the applicant. Okay.
No, all
That
we
was
do
my
is
concern.
facilitate the connection.
Okay.
And those are part of conversations that we were already having. So
We've been sending water and sewer, we were just sending them a letter saying, you need to go to BHC or PACE independently and have them provide us an analysis. And quite honestly, those fees were higher than they potentially should have been, but I can't dictate independently what they should charge somebody.
Right.
Whereas through this concurrency process, now they've given us actual proposals of streamlining the process, And then there's time and materials, larger projects that have a T&M basis in there. But this is a much better way to do this.
Yeah, when somebody wants to build a single family resident and a consultant wants to charge them an astronomical amount to plug them into the model, Mark can call them and say, no. No, you're not gonna do that. That's unrealistic.
And
So it
that's-
gives us more control.
And that gets us back to that whole GIS system. Potentially, we'll have the ability to run and take the simpler projects and plug them into the model, run the model ourselves.
We should get an award from the HBA.
Okay, so the other one is just the the city of Port Orchard, as Alan has said, was a water purveyor before it was a city. It was originally a waterworks. And the original wells, I believe, were wells. There were 3 wells on this City Hall property. One of the wells, what's shown as
Well, too.
well number 3, was actually capped when the new City Hall was built.
That one has been capped.
That was
Those are my
capped.
questions.
Yes. So what happened was there was a dearth of information on the well 4, well 7 distilling basin out here. We knew where well 7 was, and we knew where well 5 was.
7's at the Boulevard, right?
7's at the Boulevard and 5's over at the Boulevard. And we knew that there had been a well under the building capped, based talking to Brad at Casco. And we knew that there was a well in the parking lot that's just been flowing, free flowing.
That's artesian.
That's artesian. But the water flowing into the basin, the health department, when we did our last sanitary surveys, or the last 2 since I've been here, have been like, hey, there's water flowing into this. We don't really know where it's coming from, and we want you to abandon, the wells coming in and eventually get rid of this. So we had a sanitary survey compliance condition to basically what they were saying was well 4. And so Thomas, I was, from current staff, they're like, oh yeah, I think it's up on Hull. I think it's over there by well 5. I think it's under the building. And so Thomas was tasked when he came here to say, like, you need to find well 4. Because we don't know where it is. It's an artesian well that's flowing. And so he started doing shutting off some valves, and there's still water running into this basin. And, I'm taking the shorter version. But at the end of the day, we found out that there were 3 wells on this property. Well 1 was already capped.
Capped but not abandoned.
Capped but not abandoned. Well 3 was capped and abandoned. Well, it's capped. I think it's abandoned, but it's under the building.
Right.
And then the free-flowing artesian that comes up and then it flows out to the bay is what we're calling well 2. That is well 4.
That's well 4.
Well, it's well 2, but it's what we've called well 4.
all along.
And so, if you look down there, you can see that there's some, it's still open. I'm waiting to talk to Department of Health, have a discussion with them about how we are going to abate these wells, and not just simply, I know that they want us to abandon them. Abandoning means you fill it full of bentonite and you trap that water in the groundwater, right? Capping it means that you don't fill it full of bentonite and the water still stays in the groundwater. So there's some, it's very expensive to abandon wells.
Right, and so they basically had told us 2 things in that water sanitary survey. They wanted us to cap what's shown here as well 2.
We tried to do that before, and we floated the parking lot.
Yeah, the city tried to do that once before, and the parking lot started to hydraulically load.
Oh, wow.
And when you looked at the camera, it was like they put concrete or something down there, and it almost looks like a stalactite in that it was wet concrete that was like flowing up in it, like hardened. It's very strange.
So, real quick, as you think about this, you're going to come to the conclusion that, okay, so wait, we had a well that we didn't know where it was and it was flowing into the basin. How is that? That's a problem, right? What we did when we found this is calculated based off of height what the head pressure is of the well, okay? The head pressure in the well is not enough to get into the basin because the head pressure off of 7 actually would push it out, right? So although there was never a physical disconnect, there wasn't enough of a hydraulic load to affect our system. It was enough to continue 7 overflow, but it wasn't enough to impact our basin.
Right, this
And that's
well 2
important.
water wasn't ever making it into this basin. Well 7 was only feeding this, but we thought it was 4 and 7. I always said it was well
So can
4,
we
7.
disconnect this connection?
It's already been disconnected.
Okay.
It is, yeah. So,
So-
it's disconnected. Well 4 was originally Ross Creek Pump Station up off a hole, and that was determined abandoned back in the 50s or whatever that said.
Right, so Thomas got in here with the Vector truck, dug a big hole. We started going below that initial surface where we said, oh, here's the piping. And then you went deeper and there was this whole other, 7, 8 feet?
It was about 10
10
feet
feet
to top of the
down,
pipe. Yeah.
which is, usually water lines are around that 3 foot. Went deeper and then found this whole other maze of pipes that ultimately found that this artesian that's been flowing out to the bay all these years actually had, at one time was, this well that was flowing into this basin. So that's been disconnected. So the question now with Department of Health is, there's no reason to now abandon this well and cap it and abandon it, because all we're going to do is force that water to naturally spring out on the beach and potentially damage and go to a lot of cost. So Thomas is going to meet with Anavosa and say, look, this water is going to the bay. It's either going to go back through its existing spring
Right.
on the beach that you'll see at a low tide, or just let it continue to do what it's doing. And so I'm really hopeful that
It'll be different from Health's going to say it's different from a pH standpoint and a temperature standpoint, but I would argue, hey, this could be our mitigation for a new well. I don't know.
So we're going to have that conversation.
Yeah, I know.
The most important thing is we now know that the well 7 basin only has well 7 coming into it, and that was really the biggest issue we were sampling this heavily.
Right.
And once we bring well 10 online, or whatever well it is eventually this distilling basin goes away.
If we make the well acquisition and improvements that we need to make with the addition of some strategically placed PRV vaults, we will be able to change the hydraulic gradient of the city's water system and get rid of it. This building has been there since 1930. That well was drilled in 1930. We have the well log. This system has seen 3 or 4 major changes. And actually, to tie it back to the beginning of this conversation, this is exactly why we need the GIS iPad program, so that when people do things in 1930 and retire, the future generations know what happened. I mean, this is literally a microcosm of what could happen. So it's been changed a number of times. It needs to go away. It's met its service of life.
Okay, so the next item is, what you have in the packet is just the current 30-year PSE franchise agreement. So this is mainly just letting you know that we'll be working with, this was 1986, and so 2016, this agreement will expire in October. We already met with Tom Probst of Puget Sound Energy to basically update our franchise agreement for power service within our right of course. And there was some concern last year that there was a contract, it was a solid waste contract that council felt it came to them
Too late.
too late. So this is just knowing that this is moving forward. I don't see a lot of change in the language.
We don't really set rates. Is this just determine
No, that's the rates are set by the coordinated UTC. This is more just operations and language and who does what. City project, they move the poles out of the way. Private development, developer moves the poles out of the way. Things like that.
What are some of the key changes you see coming?
The only, we met, other than this just becoming in a non-typed form. I know that there was some facilities, some safety language that was going to be added into 311. And I think that's the only thing
Not much.
really that I noted. Oh, and then there was that they're no longer Power and Light.
Puget Sound Energy.
It's just PSE. It's the light
This
companies now.
Before she got married, Patricia Clark, or the last, Patty Parks, or was that her maiden name? Well, it is 30
Before my
years old.
time.
It's a lot.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was the
they lived here.
alert. Yeah.
Yeah.
Patty
Maybe
Parks.
Longer, yeah.
So that's just more of a heads up that we are looking at that renewal. The next piece is what you have in the packet are just the draft executive summaries in the water and sewer comprehensive plan updates that we're currently working on. We've worked out a timeline in the process with the planning department and with their planning commission schedule. What we need to do is to get our water system plans approved through the Department of Health and Department of Ecology. That's going to be to some degree concurrent with the planning process, and ultimately get these to the point to where the Department of Commerce has seen them after Ecology and Health have seen the water system plans. Planning Commission has reviewed them, and they ultimately get adopted by reference as Appendix J, I believe, in the comprehensive plan update. So this is a priority mission. I've asked Thomas, other than just being the water system manager, to really ride shotgun on this and make sure that these agencies, these consultants, are all meeting Nick's timeline. So this is really just more of a status of where we're at. I think we're reviewing the sewer plant in-house. I think we just got the water plan, and so yeah, we've got to get those comments back to them, get these reviewed. The capital pieces have already been reviewed to some degree as we worked with Katie Isaacson last year in the gap analysis. She went through and worked with consultants on all the capital, basically the capital facilities plan for each water and sewer. That process that we went through that took, 19 months, where we took the capital projects, reallocated them on the timeline, established the priorities, and ultimately worked with Katie to, in essence, bring in the water sewer rates that were eventually adopted in coordination with these plans. So the capital plans on these are pretty much set. Thomas was asking the other day about something. I said, well, we can add it as long as Katie says it's not going to have a huge impact on, I can't remember what it was. There was a
PRV volts.
PRV volts, to try to add that as an annual program, like we have water main replacement. And
PRV, what's the?
pressure reducing valves.
Okay, thank you.
That's where Thomas was talking about being able to redefine the hydrology of the water system instead of being a pumped system, being a gravity-fed system, strategically placing some PRVs. So really that's really all that was just saying, hey, we're working on that. The well 10 update.
Well, so I just have a couple questions, maybe just one question. Are you looking for comments on this or any review by this group? And if so, well,
Typically what happens is we're gonna do our internal staff review. It's gonna then go to health and ecology. Then it goes to planning commission. And typically the council usually doesn't see it until the planning commission sees it.
right.
Now that doesn't mean if you have an interest and you wanna read through these draft plans, historically the council hasn't seen it until it's been, pieces of it will obviously come through the utility committee.
Right.
So definitely these draft, if you see something in these draft executive summaries, I would get that back to Thomas.
Okay, I guess, yeah, that's what I would offer is if somebody wants to look through this and they have any comments, we just.
Oh,
direct them to
absolutely.
you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. historically have worked through the committee level and then working mainly with the agencies. And then when the planning commission gets it, it's a 95% draft by that point. And then the council will then take the planning commission recommendations.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that as we go through this process, having the utility committee look through these, that would be great.
In reading this BHC report, is it possible, in the event that well 10 was mothballed and we went with a street project on Perry, is it possible to phase that project? Is there a high point where you could build half of it 1 year and,
Yeah, oh yeah, that would be, yeah, it's two separate storm systems.
okay,
So you would, other than you would lose some efficiency and the impact to the neighbors doing it twice.
yeah.
And maybe what you do instead of doing it, yeah, instead of doing it north-south, maybe what you do initially is you do all the drainage,
In 1 year and then do the road project.
you do the final paving, but remember that's an inverted road section, so we're gonna have to grind the road, so.
Okay, just,
Yeah, I don't
Just a
think
question.
I don't think it's that big of a project number though, for the road and the storm drainage, storm utility, just to do it as a project. To me, the biggest impact is gonna be on the neighborhood and wanting to be as efficient as possible in doing that. So on the well 10 update, basically, I guess Thomas, maybe you want to go, you're more familiar, you know, as far as just the oversight, highlight.
Yeah, I think that we kind of already
Talked about most of it.
Mhm.
covered most of it. I think the important thing to note is that it's just a continued effort where we've seen enough information to know that we need to really look at utilizing our resources as efficiently as possible for the entire system and not just keep going down this road. But there are some real measurable, tangible things that we've seen from well 10 that gives us pause. So we're just trying to make efficient decisions there.
Right. So from a treatment standpoint, we were actually in and this is the final quantitative design process in needing to get updated manganese or raw water numbers to then do the ATAC system, and that's when the reduced pumping became evident that maybe those screens had been impacted.
Reduced pumping and pressure. That
And
was
pressure.
the other issue. Is we saw our return time of head pressure greatly multiplied, and that's
It
where
should have been almost instantaneous.
Right. So for example, if you go up to well 6 and you shut that off, you're going to see that pressure gauge go from 0 to 7 within seconds. If you get out of well 10 and you do that, you're going to want a pack of lunch. It's going to take a while for that head pressure to come back up. So in making assumptions, because that's all they are when you can't see 1,000 feet deep, something is going on around that casing. Something has changed since when it was originally drilled. And, you know, there's water there and there's water for the city there, but like I said, we've got development happening in the Sedgwick area. We're looking at changing our water system to be more efficient. We want to make sure we have the answers before we appropriate large amounts of money.
Right, and that's really one of the main catalysts was it was always thought that well 10 would simply just be turned on and we would drop a pump in it and we would have well 10 with the the new systems up at well 6, the combined water quality treatment and pumping systems, and just have a transmission main. That can still happen, and that may very well still have to happen. But at this point, it could potentially, I guess, rough numbers, we may end up having to do a $50,000 unbudgeted rehab of 10 just to get back to where we were hoping to be, 6 months ago when we really were getting into this.
And the important piece to note as well, logically, you carry that conversation out and you go, well, what about the well 6 site if we don't do well 10 now? The well 6 site is incredibly important to us. It's strategically important for our water system. whether we're pumping water up to it or we're dropping water through it, we still need that site.
That's the one by KFC.
Yeah.
Right, it's still gonna be redeveloped, and so that piece is moving ahead, that's
And then
part of
there's the
it.
main that goes from there back to the Sedgwick Sydney system through that
Right.
crosses over the creek. So there's some major connections there that tie
Right.
the two systems together.
Right.
Yeah, there's still components that we won't,
That would have been the connector, Maple, up across.
Yeah,
over
it's
across.
already, that was already, that's part of this.
Right,
And
going
it
down
still
this-
happens, it's just whether it's being pumped up it or it's gravity's bringing it down it.
Right.
right, so, and again, in that due diligence, I didn't wanna go ahead and say, okay, Thomas, go ahead and let's do a $50,000 rehab until we've at least gone down these other
And all the other
avenues.
issues, yeah.
Right. Okay, well 9, just, there's nothing in your packet on that. As we know on well 9, there are some design issues that we're continuing to work now with, I guess, a third attorney, that hasn't been brought up to speed yet. This Lighthouse has a priority list. So at some point, we'll get going back on that piece with,
Our challenge is that we want to stay as close as we can to our retainer. I mean, Lighthouse can do $400,000 worth of work for us this year. Our budget's 180.
right, so,
So we're prioritizing and, feeding them projects is on our priority.
Do you want
basis.
us to get a case number if we could, that's a separate issue.
You guys have a budget.
Okay.
For a year if you
Okay.
need your turn. Let's talk to Brandy about how she wants to manage that. That's a separate issue though.
right, so there's two things that are happening on well 9. There's the potential Arizona mission claim that might come to some fruition that obviously isn't gonna pay, as we talked last year, utility committee. PACE isn't gonna be compelled to pay for a filtration system. There may be components that they're responsible for from an Arizona missions piece, but, we still went with a flocculation system that isn't working. And so we can't get a filtration system out of it.
And we need a filter system.
And we need a filtration system. So that piece, we still have the contractor on board. We've never accepted the work. We haven't closed out the project. We need to get all the information from Carol Morris's office, the file, and we'll continue down that path. The more important piece for 2016 and what's budgeted is the redesign, which is to take that facility, modify it, then with this ATEX system to, obviously the pumps are still good, other than we may look at some piping reconfiguration. One of the issues in the design was, I think we actually were having pump issues that were based more on the downstream of the pump rather than what we thought it was maybe the motor's not being large enough. It could be that they're just pushing against each other based on the piping configuration. Instead of having sweeping Ys, they're Ts. And it may be that as a pump's running, instead of being two pumps together, pumping, there's too much head pressure and the C factor in the pipe. They're losing basically pressure just based on head loss. So we're looking at some piping reconfiguration and adding the ATEX system. But the pump house that was built and the pumps, we can use all what's there. We can still use that basin, how well 9 pumps into it, how the water travels through. It's just going to get picked up and go through a filtration system.
Yeah, it's just, in one sense, it's like anything else. You build something and then you realize, oh man, I wish we would have done that. The I wish we would have done that can be incorporated in this redesign, which is a really cool feature. It's kind of, putting lipstick on a pig, but it is there. So adding the filtration, changing the pipe configuration, pumps pump on a pump curve, so you can't just add two together and get, 1 + 1 does not equal 2 when you're talking about pumps. But changing the way that those are piped together so they're not pumping against each other, we'll be able to increase efficiencies there.
Do we have an idea what that's gonna cost? Or is that part of the redesign?
The redesign is, the proposal came in, we thought it was gonna be 135. Tomorrow night, you're gonna, or on the 8th of March, you'll see it coming in at 155. The difference being geotechnical work that was assumed to have been completed previously by the previous designer wasn't done. So there's gonna be HDR, who is working on that on behalf of the city, didn't feel comfortable without having some geotechnical work. There's plenty of money in water sewer. It's a de minimis amount change, even though the treasurer will do a budget amendment. Hopefully we'll get that piece going so that the redesign will be done, which will include an estimate for the actual work. And the hope is that we have two options, depending on when the design gets done. We either just budget it and start in 2017, or if it can get done soon enough, we could potentially do a budget amendment and at least get started on it this year. I think we're looking at $1.2 million-ish for the actual physical retrofit. And thankfully the city has reserves, but to go back to that previous comment about, we would have spent that money anyway had we gone to the filtration system. You know, the issue is that we were, in essence, told that this flocculation system would work. And so we went with that recommendation. It was a cheaper recommendation. It's turned out that it doesn't work. And so that's the Arizona emissions piece, but we can't compel PACE to provide us with an infiltration system because it was one of the alternatives. So
We'll get something back.
we'll get something
Mayor's
back.
Admission, and that's for the attorneys to resolve. And
Right.
we need to move forward with providing quality water. In the short run, we need to make it right and get it going.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think it's gonna be more in the terms of like design, redesign money, things like that, some attorney's fees. But having them pay the delta on the system, that's not gonna happen. So that's really, I think, we're back on schedule with 4 minutes to spare. These are typically an
March
hour and a half.
21st is the next meeting.
One follow-on question. For Appendix J, when would you want comments if we were to provide them at the
As
latest?
soon as possible.
A week?
Yeah, we have to get these things kicked back
Yeah.
pretty quickly, just
Right.
because there's so many hands that they have to go through, and everybody's got, Department of Health has got a timeline, and they're usually really good about using all their time.
229, you have a week.
A week,
Yeah.
all right. All right.
So it's 10:56, is that what time it is, 10:57?
10:59, actually. Why don't you just say 11?
Back here, just release.
Yes, this room.
Okay,
March
so March
21st,
21st.
9:30.
Okay, thank you, and
Thank you, that's a lot of information.
there's an extra packet if anybody wants one, are you guys good with the one?
Thank you. May I take it?
Yep,
Thanks. Thank you.
if you're recycling paper and printing on the back, or building a fire.
Building them out. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.